It's time once again for Dialogue Conspiracy with Mae Brussell. For the past 14 years, Mae has been researching and uncovering facts and evidence from between the lines of the news and placing them in a more thorough perspective of how conspiracy, political assassination, and abuses of power affect us all. Dialogue Conspiracy originates with KLRB-FM in Carmel, California. And now, Mae Brussell.
Good evening. This is Mae Brussell, and it's Dialogue Conspiracy number 312, and this is Sunday, March the 12th, 1976. On August the 1st, 1970, the Pentagon made the decision to reorganize the intelligence apparatus in the United States. That was at the time that Richard Nixon was president, and put the opening of mail, the surveillance of citizens, and the general intelligence control over citizens in this country through the Pentagon, through the admirals, the generals, specifically Admiral Gavier's name was on these documents, and General Bennett are two gentlemen who decided to pressure J. Edgar Hoover and decided to combine all domestic intelligence agencies into one operation. This was in 1970. This is known as the famous Tom Charles Houston Plan. For copies of the details of this plan, if you don't have it in books or libraries or other documents that have been printed since the Watergate story broke, you can refer to the full document, June the 8th, 1973, in the New York Times. I'm not going to read all of it to you, but it's very important for what I have to say about the research that's going on today and what I think is behind the conflict between the various researchers. On that date, on August the 1st, as I say, the Pentagon, through Admiral Gavier and General Bennett, decided to make a domestic intelligence operation identical to the Gestapo that Adolf Hitler had, and it would further combine fascist control of this country. The first move they had to make was to placate J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI rather, who wouldn't go along with this plan. And they said that the FBI director would be in charge of the operation. Now, Hoover rejected this operation, in quotes. This is from the New York Times at the time. It said that there was no valid argument against opening mail or other covers except that Mr. Hoover was concerned with the civil liberties, that people may become upset. And the general and admiral went on to say this risk is an acceptable one to us and hardly serious enough to justify denying ourselves a valuable and legal intelligence tool. They were going to overthrow our constitutional rights of privacy and freedom of speech and ask the director to go along with it. They wanted to persuade J. Edgar Hoover. There's evidence in these documents that he objected to this, and the admirals, in quotes, said, let's stroke him, let's go to the president and point out that it's absolutely necessary to have this procedure in the United States against the citizens of the United States. Those people involved in this group, the domestic intelligence group, were the officials of the FBI, the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and the military services. Hoover died in 1972. I believe that he was murdered in May of 72 in order to get this program going that the Pentagon wanted. The Pentagon wanted to combine the FBI, CIA under their Navy intelligence, Defense Intelligence, Army, Air Force agencies. It was James McCord, the liaison of the CIA to the Pentagon, who blew the whistle on these plans at the time of Watergate. He told Judge Sirica that we had the formation of a possible Gestapo. He compared it to Hitler's Germany. And at the time of the Watergate arrest, he was part of and knew of the plans through Squad 19 and the other operations of the planning of killing Richard Nixon, which would be the next step. J. Edgar Hoover was killed in 1972, and Watergate came a month later, in June of 72. Hoover was dead, and George Wallace was shot in 1972. It would be like the Reichstag story. The Watergate entry was important because the left would have evidence in their files and on their telephones that they were planning these riots in Miami, and then Nixon could be killed and the military and defense could come in and take over at that time. Now, the Watergate situation cooled off with the help of Leon Jaworski, who stopped investigating or prosecuting. He also worked for the Warren Commission. And for 6 years, this COINTEL program has sat in limbo, but I know that the Pentagon is going to sit quietly with this, and they have to have another tactic. And one of the tactics that is being used by the counterintelligence agencies of the Defense Industry Security Command and the military is to break down all credibility of the FBI and the CIA and tear it to pieces in order to make way for the Pentagon to take over. And this is one of the things we're seeing now with investigations of the Warren Commission work. The FBI is being fingered and the CIA are being fingered. But notice that the military and the defense are not named at all. Jimmy Carter, the President of the United States, was a graduate of Annapolis and Navy intelligence. Also, L. Patrick Gray, who was appointed to succeed and follow J. Edgar Hoover after he died, was a graduate of Annapolis. Mr. William Turner from the military and a graduate of Annapolis, along with Jimmy Carter, same class, is director of the CIA. The president in the White House is a military man. His CIA director is a military man. And Mr. Webster, the new director of the FBI, it was a roommate and classmate and long friend of William Turner, is now the director of the FBI. So you have the White House, the FBI, and the CIA in very close relationships. And I want to link that to what happened this last week with the shooting of Larry Flynt. And I want to get the groundwork clear for further programs, or so that you understand what I'm saying about what's happening in the Flynt operation in Los Angeles, the LA Free Press, and Hustler, and the movement of Mark Lane to the West Coast. Larry Flynt was named in the news. He's been in there all this week. He lingered between life and death. He was shot with his attorney in Georgia, March the 6th. I knew before he was shot that this move was a big operation, the Flynt operation, to find out who killed JFK. For references on past shows, the Dialogue Conspiracy, I don't want to repeat it. I've talked about that operation on January the 15th of this year, December the 12th of 1977, February the 12th, February the 19th, and February 26th. So you know that something important is happening down in Los Angeles in the Flynt operation, because very seldom do I have a chance to repeat or stress anything as much as I do this particular affair. It reminds me of the arrest in Concord, California, on January 10th, 1974, of Joseph Romero and Russell Little of the SLA fame. I was leaving that day that they were arrested on charges of killing Dr. Marcus Foster, a school superintendent in Oakland, California. And before I went east, I was doing lecturing at Syracuse, University of New York, and in Arizona, and I went up to Minneapolis. Before I went, I called KPFA and Mark Schwartz up there and said, save every paper of the Bay Area, the Chronicle, the Examiner, the Oakland Tribune. A very big story is going to break, synchronized to the zebra killings in San Francisco. And now Romero and Little arrested, and a Nancy Ling Perry was writing communiques for them on January the 17th. And on February the 4th, 1974, Patricia Hearst was kidnapped, and that launched the domestic terror of the right in the United States, that they were going to try and pass off as the left, and actually with the Phoenix CIA operation to bring terrorism to the United States. It was that same necessity to keep talking about the Flynt operation that I know something big is going on there. I point this out at the time because I have tried to reach Dick Gregory. I've called him several times in the last few weeks. I asked Paul Krasner to get in touch with Larry Flynt. I was down there in Los Angeles, but it's impossible. It was impossible to get through to him. Now, to make one point perfectly clear, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Larry Flynt was shot, not because of pornography, but because he had just spent $1 million to draw in leads to the JFK killing. I'm sure that that's why he was shot. There's no doubt in my mind that other persons have been shot for the same reason, such as the U-2 pilot Gary Powers, the FBI director William Sullivan, the CIA agent George DeMohrenschildt, organized crime member Sam Giancana, John Rosselli, CIA members Sheffield Edwards and William Harvey, and Carlos Prios Sequeiros. Each one of them working for the government also was shot. Because a person is shot and killed or almost killed does not mean that they're not instrumental to the government. The government can be cited for killing their agents over and over again. These murders are happening. Witnesses are being killed. But I have my strong feelings about these murders. When the committee in Washington got formed, I did send out that position paper that there should, before any witness was called, the House Select Committee, there should be a complete list of every major witness that was killed. And I suggested and typed and had this sent out that they should have the information of every witness that was primary to the Kennedy assassination that was killed, the date they died, how they died, and what they knew about the assassinations, so that when these shootings and murders took place, we could say, here's a primary witness again. And when people were called to testify, we would have information that they would have provided had they lived and what they said before they had died. Now, Larry Flynt was under indictment in Ohio and in Georgia on pornography charges. When he was shot in Georgia, he was defending himself for just such charges. Flynt was singled out for arrest. Obviously, we don't see the publishers of Playboy, We, Gallery, and other pornographic magazines being shot. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. We don't see very many people like that arrested. He was singled out, one person isolated for arrest, just like one person was isolated for arrest for making the movie Deep Throat. Those that produced it and really reaped the millions from it weren't singled out. While he was under indictment in Cincinnati, Ohio, and in Georgia, the sister of the President of the United States, with her many contacts in Dallas, Texas, Georgia, New Orleans, which are vital political areas, chose to single out Larry Flynt and turn him on to Christ to be, in quotes, saved. Now, it's too soon to know what Ruth Stapleton was doing or who she was serving, what master she was serving, including Christ. But there's a very strange position here. Her brother is a notorious cover-up artist for the most powerful control group in the USA today. His roving sister may not be very apart from Jimmy Carter in the power structure. She can't save all the souls in America, so I think it's interesting that she chose to choose not only a pornographer of questionable reputation, this dirty old man, so to speak, but a man under criminal indictment. Now, under ordinary circumstances, this would be politically harmful to anybody, much less the President of the United States, to have his sister choosing this kind of a person to turn to Christ at that particular time. In fact, it would be a laughing matter that politicians would stay far away from unless her actions helped the very people who put Jimmy Carter into power in the first place, and unless Jimmy Carter and Ruth Stapleton are acting under instructions. I'm not saying it happened that way, but what I'm saying is it doesn't hurt to share my reasoning with you. Nelson and David Rockefeller, the notorious Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, hand-picked President Jimmy Carter with his Navy intelligence background. The one thing the Rockefellers want to avoid at any cost is any link of them to the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agencies that played a role in killing John F. Kennedy. George DeMohrenschildt, agreed now by the so-called experts to be the most important link to the Kennedy assassination, was exposed by me as early as 1965, and I went to see Jim Garrison in New Orleans in 1967 to bring the links of DeMohrenschildt to Clay Shaw and David Ferry. DeMohrenschildt is one witness out of 552 that had direct links to the Rockefellers and the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency combined. So you have a president put in by the Rockefellers, you have a link of the assassination to the Rockefellers, and then you all of a sudden have the sister of the president going to Columbus, Ohio, where a man's under criminal indictment, and then after her visit he becomes gun-ho on the Kennedy assassination. There's kind of a contradiction with who put Jimmy in power, with what Flynt was going to do, unless Ruth Stapleton and Jimmy Carter and the Rockefellers know why she singled out Mark Lane and Larry Flynt. What did Larry Flynt do? He then met up with Mark Lane and Dick Gregory. He gave Paul Krasner, the former editor of The Realist, all his Hustler magazine, a multi-million-dollar operation, this great satirist and iconoclast making fun of these very power structures. And with business acumen so sharp that Paul hasn't been able to publish a book or give a college lecture or get anything out except in Crawdaddy and Berkeley Barb and a few alternative press. He's literally starving, totally broke the last few years. even admitting the stealing from Safeway, which is owned by Chase Manhattan and Rockefeller, the controlling interests, who published the really only first important breakthrough that I think came out in the JFK assassination, the summer of 72, which was my section of the article on Watergate called The American Assassin. And in that publication that Paul Krasner published was the link of George DeMohrenschildt and the Rockefellers to the Nobel oil holdings in Russia, the Tsarist oil companies, the combines responsible for the killing of JFK. Krasner published that in 1972, paid his dues by semi-starving ever since, and then is singled out by this network to become the publisher of The Realist. The next move Larry Flynt did was to open offices, two of them in the high-rise Century City area of West Los Angeles, directly located coincidentally between the L.A. Country Club and the Hillcrest Country Club, which were our two power blocks, particularly the L.A. Country Club in Los Angeles, where he set up computers, staff, with literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, an unlimited check to Mark Lane to say, find out who killed Kennedy. The next thing that Lay did was to hire Weck Swearington, official of the FBI for 25 years, who's put on the team, paid by Larry Flynt, along with Mark Lane, to work with Mark Lane, as innocent people around the country were asked, after a $2 million ad, approximately $2 million in 40 papers, full page, to help them send in information on who killed JFK. When Mark Lane was questioned about Weck Swearington working for him, being as Gerald Ford also was an informer on the Warren Commission for the FBI, how would you trust a 25-year man of the FBI working with Mark Lane? He said in quotes, "We are sort of a born-again organization, and we believe in redemptive experiences." Now, I know Larry Flynt was shot because of the ad he placed, and Mrs. Flynt said that she believed, in quotes, the CIA shot Larry Flynt because he named the CIA as being cause of the JFK death. The very first issue of the LA Free Press that Lane got out says the CIA did it, case is solved. Now, we also know that Murray Chotiner of the CIA and Organized Crime, and Clay Shaw and David Ferry, as well as the other names I listed off, were murdered by the CIA. Now Larry Flynt is shot. And I'm wondering to myself, and I'm wondering to you, if the Defense Intelligence Agency, the same Pentagon that wanted to take over in 1970, could weaken the CIA, weaken the FBI, in order for them to continue to make the inroads to take over that they just planned a few years ago. It isn't many years ago, and I know that their garden plot is still full bloom, with computers going into Utah, the state of Utah, getting ready for the overthrow of the United States. We've talked about garden plot, and I'll be doing some other shows, but what I'm trying to say is that the CIA was fingered as being responsible for the Kennedy killing. A week later, Larry Flynt is shot, and the family and everyone can say, yes, the CIA did it, the CIA did it. And the important thing is that it will be an excuse to curtail or take over the CIA. Now, I never thought the day would come where I would defend anybody like J. Edgar Hoover or the CIA or Joe McCarthy. But there still is a monster bigger, say, than the army that Kaiser Wilhelm had in Germany. The Gestapo was worse than the army. There was a rightist army in Spain up till 1936. Franco was worse than the rightist army. There is a degree between a rightist conservative establishment and a fascist establishment. And the one thing that Mark Lane and the Free Press hasn't done, and I'm waiting to see them do it, the one thing they haven't done, and you can challenge them, you researchers, you can write letters, you can make tapes of this tape. These articles have never fingered, he has never fingered the Defense Department in 14 years research. He has never named the Rockefeller connections or the Onassis connections. He has never named the Defense Industry Security Command, whose same offices are in Columbus, Ohio, where the LA Free Press was published, and DISC is located there in the same place. They have never mentioned Navy intelligence as being responsible for these assassinations, having a part, or the role of the State Department with Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, if I'm wrong, correct me. Send me any tape recordings of lectures that have been given or published, say by Mark Lane, George O'Toole, Robert Groden, and see if they mention the Defense Department, the Rockefeller connections, the Defense Industry Security Command, Navy intelligence, the State Department or Immigration and Naturalization, Department of Immigration and Naturalization for their role. It is my personal feeling that Larry Flynt could be shot and sacrificed after he published the CIA did it, so that it would be one more chance to dismantle the CIA and the FBI and tear them apart. Mr. Phillips, Dave Phillips of the CIA, retired, now lecturing around, was at a forum on intelligence in Los Angeles with Mark Lane. He said, if you can prove to me that the CIA was involved in the Kennedy assassination, I'll work to dismantle the agency. Is the Defense Intelligence Agency doing the dismantling? Where are these admirals, Admiral Gaylor or General Bennett of the Pentagon, that wanted to deny us of our rights in 1970? Are they pulling the switches now? I believe that the line of the LA Free Press issues has been and will be to hold the line on the CIA and the FBI and no other government agent. I believe it's the Maginot Line of this battle. It's like the trenches of Verdun, and in order to get to the truth of these assassinations, we have to get over these lines that are being held. I believe there was a military takeover in 1963. I believe the headquarters for that are now in Atlanta, Georgia, and Houston, Texas. And as I say, the Flynt Press comes out of Columbus, Ohio, where the headquarters for DISC are located as well, and is Alabama. I think we should look into these generals. I know that if you study the history of World War II, there were men whose names were notorious, such as Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, Mr. Goebbels, and other German names, Mr. Hess. But there were people behind them. There were people like Martin Bormann and George Bell and Alfred Rosenberg and Sir Henry Duterding and Henry Ford and the Ford Foundation. There were people behind these men. Those were just the front men. There was Mr. Lindbergh and a lot of very prominent Americans that read Merchants of Death. They were the people that put Hitler into power. He was only their puppet. And when he was through, they cut the strings and point their finger and say, he's the bad guy. But he had the charisma. He was the bad guy. Now, I got a telephone call this week from Michael Canfield, the co-author with A.J. Weberman of Coup d'Etat. And he's down in Los Angeles. They wrote a wonderful book. And this is one book. This is one of the books by the researchers that mentions George DeMohrenschildt, William Buckley, the Nobel oil fields, like I did in my article in The Realist. This book comes to the nitty-gritty. And Canfield told me that he was in Washington, D.C. on a forum with Lane, and Lane attacked his book and chewed it apart and viciously has ignored him and insulted him. And he's down there helping Paul Krasner with The Realist and thought that he would be on the salary, but he says Krasner is literally, in quotes, going bananas. He hasn't been, I think Canfield so far has only been paid $100 for work on anything. On this matter, when he has a published book and years of research on the Kennedy assassination, and this is at Century Park East, and right down the block, upstairs on the 16th floor, is a building with a computer and an FBI man, and people held press conferences, and Canfield is down the street and can't get through Krasner, can't see Flynt, can't get any information. He tried to write for the Free Press, and if you see the Free Press front cover, it says it's a free press. Dick Gregory tells you inside that this is a place where you can bring your material. If you don't believe me and you're a researcher, send them an article. Send them a document. Mail it in and see if Mark Lane will take anything that isn't written by Lane, Freed, or Grodin, or other people who are unsigned. That whole issue had no signatures on it. Now, Paul Krasner is resurrecting The Realist, and he had long promised me my own conspiracy newsletter. He took subscriptions for years and accumulated about $5,000 and a list of names. And he said to me, now he's supposed to make $90,000 a year off of Larry Flynt. He said, I'll get out The Realist again, and you can write a column a month, and then I'll give you $5,000 for your own newsletter. And I said, fine. And I've told you before in one of these shows, he said to me, don't write about Oswald. Well, Krasner has been his own boss, and getting out The Realist with him is Art Kunken, who is just a marvelous person. And I questioned Krasner's independence in his operation, and I questioned Art Kunken's, and they assured me they don't get orders from anyone, meaning the defense agencies that would be coming down, that would be controlling the LA Free Press, or from Lane, who could be a conduit of the Rockefeller Defense Combine. They assured me they were independent. And he suggested I write about Son of Sam. But Mae Brussell is an ornery person, not very nice person, and I don't think Son of Sam is pertinent. If Larry Flynt is offering millions of dollars to find out who killed Kennedy, I may want a little bit of it. So I wrote my first article called Who's Afraid of the Torbett Document, which fingers that you all know the Torbett Document I've talked about, and it fingers the Pentagon. Well, Krasner was simply furious. He just blew his top and sent me a memo this week. He just was absolutely livid. He didn't even sign it. He was really mad at me. And he said, how dare you question my independence from Lane? He said, I will not give you $5,000 for your newsletter, which will never be forthcoming from me. You can send this article. I'll give you one article a month, I guess, until I get them really mad. 1,000 words a month in the Realist for 1 year is what he wanted as against my newsletter. And I wrote back to him and said that that isn't very satisfactory, that people that have sent money for a newsletter that is all mine will not even necessarily want anything else that's in the Realist. And I think the choice of having a newsletter for 7 or 8 years going, such as I've been on Dialogue Conspiracy here, almost into the 7th year, starting the 7th year, is different than having a 5-minute newscast on a radio station with one news topic per day or week. So I told Krasner that I would very seriously have to place a lawsuit in that case. The Attorney General, Evel Younger, is suing Allen Ginsberg because he has a publication and promised to get it out every week, and it's only going out every other week, and it's fraudulent advertising, and it's using the mails deceptively. Now, I don't want to sue Paul Krasner because that is what the Pentagon or the government would want, divide and conquer. I don't want to get into an entanglement with Art Kunkel and Paul Krasner, such as Huey Newton did with Eldridge Cleaver. I used to want and hope that they would make up and see who was dividing them ideologically. And I even believe that if I had my own newsletter going, Krasner could take it over and it would be the Realist when he gets out. If Larry Flynt is too sick to carry on, or this thing folds up, I don't know what condition or state of mind he's going to be in. But it would be a good thing for Krasner to take some of his money now and put in a publication, because he has no guarantee that the Realist is going to go or the Hustler will continue. Only time will tell. And I don't want to be in the position of having a lawsuit with somebody who's been my friend for 6 years. And I don't like to see him in the position of taking orders because he was broke from an establishment that he spent the last 14 years fighting. I don't know what I would do if I owed thousands and thousands of dollars. I doubt if I would line up with a sleazy team. A lot of people don't understand the difference between the quality of research of what I'm doing and why I constantly make these charges at Mark Lane and Dick Gregory. And I don't think I'll bring it up anymore on Dialogue Conspiracy for a long, long time. I want it clear now that what I fear is that the Pentagon is weakening the FBI and CIA through these publications as if they're not bad enough right now, and purposely continuing to whittle them away until we get that famous COINTEL program that Tom Charles Houston had set up in the beginning, in which he said that except for J. Edgar Hoover, we would be home safe if the Pentagon took care of our needs, and in quotes, Hoover thinks the civil liberties may be upset in this country, but in quotes, according to the Pentagon, the risk is surely an acceptable one and hardly serious enough to justify denying ourselves a valuable and legal intelligence tool. So legally, they could tear apart the agencies as bad as they are now and then let the Gestapo, such as James McCord said, take over. Well, that's all for now on Dialogue Conspiracy. I'll see you next Sunday night. Take care of yourselves and keep reading those newspapers and study as much as you can.
You've been listening to Dialogue Conspiracy with Mae Brussell.